Hey guys, and welcome back to the internet. I hope you all had a fantastic 4th of July. You know, maybe if you were buying some fireworks, you can relate to this meme. When you fight the cashier for an hour to get a $1 discount. But I think it's time we get back into some stories. Starting with, peeing on the floor, no food for your coworkers. So my first job was at a fast food chain when I was 16. As the new and young guy, I often got the bathroom cleaning duty, which usually wasn't too bad at my location. But one day, as I was just about done, I was pushing the mop across the floor when a very big, tall and athletic dude walks in. I politely warned him about the slippery floors, and he just stared at me. Then he put his back to the wall, across from the urinal, dropped trow, and peed all over the newly cleaned floors. He did this all while looking directly at me. He smirked at me as he finished and walked out, not even washing his hands by the way, and headed towards the counter as I hung the "bathroom closed" sign. I went to talk to my manager and explained what happened. He was a good guy and told me that someone else would re-clean the bathroom, and that I should go stock some cups up front. This gave me the opportunity to witness what was about to happen. So my manager walks up to the front counter just in time to take this guy's order. The guy pulls out a sheet and proceeds to read off a large order from his company. If I remember right, it was for about 30 people, and they were all customized. You know, like no mustard or extra pickles, etc. As he finished his order, my manager said, "Sir, you will not be getting food from us today." The guy gets enraged and he starts pounding the register with his hands and yelling about racism. But my manager politely informs him that he cannot urinate all over our floors and expect to be treated with respect. The guy starts whining about how particular everyone is and that he must have the food from our chain, and there is not another chain for 10 miles. My manager wished him good luck and pointed out that he has enough evidence on the security cameras to call the police. The dude chose to leave, but we all knew his day was going to be a rough one. You know, I hope his day gets a lot worse. In fact, I hope his whole life gets a lot worse after this. Next we've got, you bought a present for the puppy and not for my baby? So my dad's dog, Dennis, passed away 4 months ago. Our family was grief-stricken and loved him deeply. Dennis was like my dad's third child, besides my stepbrother and I. A few days ago, my dad and stepmom adopted a puppy from the local shelter. I was ecstatic when I found out and went over to their place with lots of presents for the little guy. Chew toys, balls, puppy pen, and a puppy bed. My stepbrother and his wife were also there with their 18-month-old son. She saw all the puppy's gifts and gave me a really annoyed look. I asked if she was okay, to which she replied, "Well, I just think it's a bit cruel to my child that you're parading all these toys in front of him and haven't even gotten anything for him." Keep in mind that it wasn't my nephew's birthday, or any other special occasion. I reminded her of this fact and she seemed shocked and said something like, "So what? He's your nephew. Doesn't he deserve better treatment than a pet? You could have gotten a few toys for him." So I told her, first of all, your kid is 18 months old and is incapable of realizing that the puppy has been given a few toys. And second of all, just because I'm being nice to the puppy doesn't automatically mean I'm treating your son badly. Before she could reply, I just got up, said goodbye to my dad, kissed the puppy, and left. I really don't think what I did was in any way disrespectful to her family, so I just don't understand her reaction. Hey, you gotta learn that to entitled people, when you do something nice to somebody, it means that you must be taking it away from somebody else. It's all just a zero-sum game to them. Now we've got hot-headed neighbor. So many of the stories on here are about hot-headed neighbors, and mine is no different. A family moved in next to us about a year ago and kept to themselves for the most part. The husband was a strange one and very peculiar about his lawn. He blew it off every morning and watched it religiously. Whenever any kid would set foot on it, he would come out to warn them off. I didn't care and told my kids to make sure not to go to his lawn. Then he started an annoying habit of putting his trash right on the corner of my lawn, about a foot over the line. I asked him numerous times not to do that, but he smugly ignored my requests. I thought he was a douche canoe, but I wasn't going to cause a big stink about it, until one day he pushed it too far. He'd been working some minor home renovations for a couple weeks. One morning I found a pile of construction trash sitting in the infamous corner. It included some lumber with nails sticking out of it, glass panels from old screen doors, and other items. The next day I got a notice from our HOA telling me that I would be fined if I didn't move it. So I did just that. I dragged the mountain of trash back across onto his property and called the management company to tell them that it wasn't my trash. The next day I came out to find the trash had been moved back onto my lawn. So I drug it back to his lawn and left a note on it asking him nicely to not move it back to my property. That afternoon, I see him angrily dragging it back onto my lawn, and I confronted him. He starts to get smart, telling me that it was only 6 inches on my lawn. I mean, it was completely on my lawn, and it shouldn't be a big deal, and that the city was going to pick it up in 2 days. I told him that the glass and nails were a liability, and that I didn't want it on my lawn. He tries to belittle me, and then proceeds to tell me that my lawn service is actually cutting part of his lawn, and tries to take that angle. I inform him that his fence and his perceived property line in the front yard is actually 2 feet on my property, and that the property he is referring to is not his. I explained that I would gladly hire a surveyor to conform the property lines, and he could adjust his fence accordingly. After he leaves, I move the trash back to the middle of his drive. He comes back out, and I tell him that if he moves it back, I was going to call the police for trespassing. This is where his hot temper kicks in, and he comes and shoves me, pushes me down on the street, and threatens to kick my butt if I go back on his property with the trash. By this point, I had enough and called the police. They showed up to talk to me. They go in to talk to him, but he denies pushing me. My wife intervenes and reminds me that we have footage on our Ring camera. The police review the footage and promptly arrest him. His wife comes over to plead with us to drop the charges, but we tell her that we won't. They charge him with battery and disorderly conduct. He also happens to be a prominent figure in the local school system. My wife posted the video on social media and it went viral among the local parenting groups. The senior administrator for the school system called me to ask about the incident, so I told him my side of the story. He hasn't been back to work since the incident, almost 2 months. His job was just posted, so I'm assuming they let him go or he quit. I also hired a surveyor to come stake out my property lines. It turns out that his fence in the backyard that he built without asking me is over 3 feet on my land. I had my attorney send him a formal request to relocate his fence, which will require him to build a new 60-foot section of fence, since I won't let him connect to mine. Moral of the story, act like a douche canoe and lose your job, your fence that you thought you had, and lose some money for legal fees. Man, this story just makes me want to get Ring. Or maybe get a brand deal with Ring. If there's anyone over at Ring Security, I'd love to do a brand deal with you guys. Gotta keep those entitled people out. Now we've got Lady demands I conjure a cup from thin air. So I worked at a small McDonald's in 2009. I have a ton of these stories as it was the unfortunate area of town, but this one is my favorite. The woman peeps into the drive-thru and asks for an extra large strawberry milkshake, which is a size McDonald's doesn't or didn't have, although they do have a large, which is a good leader. This woman insists that I give her an extra large. I inform her that I cannot conjure cups. She demands her milkshake and goes to the window. I take her money, give her the large one, and think the order is done. No, she throws this milkshake at me and demands an extra large. The manager wants to step in, but I get crafty. We had these buckets you would give to kids with Happy Meals. I tell the runner to crank the machine to the brim. I get my hoard of strawberry cow sludge and cover that thing with cling wrap and poke a straw into it. I hand this to the lady and just say we ran out of extra large cups. She snatched it from me and peels out of the place. She comes back a minute later, covered in milkshake. Apparently she went over a speed bump going 50, and it went off like a grenade. Manager said he'd give her our biggest size, large, for free. She goes on basically the same rant, had to get this woman taken out of the place by the cops, kicking and screaming about her milkshake. Wow, I love that after she just had a milkshake explosion in her car, her biggest priority was getting a new one. I think I have a pretty good idea of the size this woman is. Alright, now let's move on to one big story before the question of the day, called, You Expect Me to Help You After You Demanded to Be Compensated for Not Going to Your Own Father's Funeral? You don't deserve anything, and I'll only speak to you in any other language other than English. So, I've mentioned a little about my family. They're a hot mess, on both sides. Now, my mom wasn't the greatest mom, but she did take care of Poppy, my grandpa, her dad. And I'm grateful that I at least had him growing up as my role model. Some of my family expects too much and expects help when they do nothing to show that they actually deserve it. The whole, but we're family, doesn't work on me anymore either. Recently, an auntie of mine decided to get back into contact with me. Not sure if she actually missed me or just missed getting the money from my mom. My auntie hasn't worked a day in her whole life, and was basically paid by the government to pay her being unable to close her legs. I know that sounds super harsh, but she's very self-entitled, rude, and a lazy jerk. She even got her kids to sell cigarettes at school. Freaking school. For money for herself. I know this happened because my mom and she had a screaming match when my mom found out. I used to visit my auntie and cousins all the time, to where I actually felt that they were my brothers because we were so close. However, my auntie went too far when we moved to another state and expected my mom to pay for her to come visit us. She wanted us to pay for her company. She didn't see her dad because she missed him. She did it for the money. I tried to be as positive as I could for Poppy's sake, but he didn't get to see his other daughters. My mom has 2 other siblings. But I had enough when my entitled aunt blamed my mother for Poppy getting cancer. Freaking cancer. I wouldn't be surprised if she thought it was contagious like the flu, because she was an early high school dropout. Had no book smarts or street smarts, even though she lives in a very dangerous area. The kind that once it gets nighttime, you shouldn't leave because of muggers, drug dealers, gangs, etc. My eldest cousin was, and still is, very gifted and never forgets anything. The 2 youngest, however, were really stupid. The youngest is a quarter Chinese and would actually go out of his way to call every Asian he saw C-words, even though he is part Chinese as well. That kind of stupid. I'm usually a calm and collected person, but once he started blaming my mom for Poppy's cancer, I lost the plot. I rarely snap, but when I do, my face gets red with rage and shout, which I rarely do. This is what set me off. So my dumb cousin says, Your mother caused his cancer, you know. If he didn't live there, he'd be fine. Keep in mind, this was 2014 and I was 18 at the time. She was 26. My cousin was so much of a coward that she couldn't say it to my face, but on the phone. I say, "Are you freaking kidding me? We made him comfortable here when he moved. You guys could have taken him when we moved." He didn't move with us straight away. He decided to stay with us because we actually treated him like a person, and I missed him like crazy. You guys had the room to take him, but you didn't want to spend the money on your own grandpa. If anyone, you lot should be ashamed. It was silent for a moment, then she mumbled something and hung up. Then the second youngest cousin kept ringing us and harassing us too. I took care of it because my mom wanted to be there for Poppy, so he wasn't alone. I took over all of the chores at the house and even cooked food for my mom to take into the hospital so she could at least eat a proper meal. After about a month after he passed, we still got harassing calls. My mom was a mess. I was too, but my mom got so depressed that she didn't eat much and kept to herself. My entitled aunt said that she was entitled to have a part of her dad's cremation sent to her, even though she couldn't be bothered to say goodbye to him when she could. Even my auntie, who has agoraphobia, which is a fear of going outside, came to say goodbye. I have never yelled at my entitled aunt at this point, so she was shocked and silent. Also, I have a tendency of swearing like a sailor when I'm mad. I say, "You gotta be kidding me! You deserve Jack! You were too lazy to say goodbye to Poppy when he was dying in the hospital. You have no one else to blame other than your freaking self. Grow the F up, you self-entitled, hypocritical beep." Silence. "But he got cancer because of your mother." I say, "How freaking stupid are you? You can't catch cancer, you freaking mophead. He smoked like a chimney since he was 14 and drank a lot. Of course it was going to affect him. Keep in mind that my Poppy was born in 1942, and it was considered cool, and some people even believed it had health benefits." "You can't talk to me like that. I'm older than you." I say, "Really? No grown adult with common sense believed that cancer is contagious. You freaking wombat. You want Poppy? Come get him yourself, you lazy beep." My Poppy already made his will and agreed for his 3 daughters to keep parts of his ashes if they wanted. He even put me in his will for almost $1,500, because I was more like his daughter than grandchild, and had never once disrespected him because I looked up to him. I didn't want the money, by the way. I just wanted some of his clothes. I know it sounds a little weird, but I was going to miss him, and even his scent. His Stephen King collection because it had sentimental value to me, as he introduced me to Stephen King as a teenager, and I also wanted to keep his vinyl collection because we would do a dorky little dance with each other on some of our favorite songs. I slammed the home phone down and took deep breaths because I was so riled up that I was shaking. My mom looked at me, completely shocked, and asked what happened. She had never seen me this angry in her life. I was the patient one in the family, and the first to try to defuse the situation. My mom says, "What happened? I've never heard you yell like that ever, and your face is tomato red." After I told her, giving her a synopsis, since entitled aunt is plain cruel in her wording, she was upset, but not surprised. We got more calls after that, and I told my mom that I'll get it, and that she should just sit back down. My dumb cousin was screaming once I answered. "How dare you talk to my mom like that?" Instead of carrying on with this ridiculous, idiotic fight, I answered in Chinese. She sounded obviously confused, thinking she dialed the wrong number. She then rang again. I answered in Chinese again. Once I hung up on her while she was yelling, I told my mom that we should block their numbers and get a new number. Oh, by the way, the second youngest cousin has actually gone to jail for numerous things, including battery and assault, having sex with a minor, he knocked up a 15-year-old girl, and I wish I could also testify sexual assault as well, but my only proof is my PTSD. I hope he rots in prison. I decided to share this because of his death anniversary and my entitled auntie trying to get me to contact to start drama all over again. I, of course, blocked her. I still wrote her number down just in case she tried to harass my mom or others in our family that has also cut ties with her. I don't care what you say to me, but come after my mother and I'll hunt you down. Well, it is sad and painful to know that people this stupid and evil are really out there, but I like to think that maybe they won't survive too much longer. Alright, the question of the day today is, what's the strangest conversation you've accidentally eavesdropped on? So I was in line for a roller coaster years ago when I overheard a 12-year-old and her even younger sister talking to 2 nice strangers, all standing in line behind me. The 12-year-old was talking about how she lives on a farm with her grandparents, her little sister, and her newborn kid. She goes on and on about her young kid, and how her grandparents homeschool her so she has time to raise and take care of her kid, and how her little sister is helping too. She goes on to describe how little and precious and sweet her kid is, and how much she loves her. I spent the entire time in line stunned and speechless, and impressed by how engaged and unbothered the 2 strangers were during the whole conversation, even asking to see pictures. It wasn't until we got to the front of the line that I realized she meant kid, as in baby goat. Yeah, you know, if there's one thing I hate the most about the English language, it's how many times that there are reused words for different meanings. I mean, they do make for some good dad jokes every once in a while, but they just get so obnoxious when you're trying to, form an actual conversation. I overheard 2 guys on the subway in New York City discussing what was the perfect handgun caliber to whack someone. There was a small dude who was adamant that the best gun was a 9mm because that's what cops use. Then the big dude starts shaking his head negatively, goes on to give a small speech about anatomy and ballistics. then proceeds to state that a competent assassin would use a mere .22 handgun. Since it's hard to track, ammo is cheap, and you can mag dump someone in the head without anyone knowing it's gunfire. I think those guys were on their way to a hitman convention. Yeah, those are the kinds of people that you're just like, I'm gonna slip away and I hope I never see them again. A few kids were debating on what happened to poop after you flushed it on the train. One believed it exploded on impact with the rails. Another debated the possibility of it being shot out of the side like a cannon. And another knew it was used to fuel the train. I think the idea of mobile plumbing is just a little too absurd for these kids. Me and some coworkers were eating lunch outside on a patio, and all of a sudden 2 guys walked by, and one goes, "Well, I was licking her butthole, and I forgot I was allergic to peanuts, so I spent all night in the hospital." We started cracking up, and the guy noticed and said, "What? It happens." Way to play it off, man. I once sat on a balcony on the 3rd floor at 2 a.m. listening to a guy on the ground level who discovered his girlfriend was cheating on him on the 4th floor. He climbed a tree and saw her topless with a guy with their lights on. I opened a beer and took a seat. "You said you were studying. You don't study with your shirt off." Man, how high of a tree do you have to climb to catch somebody cheating? Well, sort of the opposite. We would run laps around the perimeter drive of our football field for PE, and part of this drive was right up next to a bunch of classrooms. A lot of times, teachers would have windows open. My high school was an old Frankenstein of additions from the last 120 years, so we still have windows that open and close. So my friends and I made it a point to have the absolute weirdest conversations we could right next to any of these open windows, in an effort to distract or confuse anyone who happened to be listening from inside. I think my favorite starter anecdote was, and I shamelessly stole this from Whose Line, "And that's how my colon ended up in my esophagus." I was later told by one of the teachers who recognized me that their whole class stopped and confusedly looked at each other before laughing it off. It was one of my proudest moments. Well, that's all the stories I've got for today. Sorry the cat wasn't in the video. She was kind of hiding behind me today. So I'm just going to finish this off with an extra Faye video, so thanks for watching.
Rawr.